My first night in Yellowstone wasn't supposed to feel like this. I'd only been on the job a few hours when the knocking started, sharp and deliberate against the steel door at the base of Tower 6. I froze with my flashlight in hand, remembering the single rule Chief Rowan had drilled into me before climbing up here. Never, under any circumstances, open the tower door after midnight. I checked my watch. It was 12:07. The knocking came again, steady, 3 raps like knuckles on a hollow coffin. My throat tightened. Nobody was supposed to be out here this late, not hikers, not staff, no one. The tower was locked from the inside. The ladder pulled up, but the sound didn't care about locks. I wanted to yell, to call out, but something in me knew better. My hand hovered over the radio, then pulled back. Instead, I sat down at the desk and tried to steady my breathing, thinking about why I'd even taken this job in the first place. The truth wasn't pretty. I'd spent 6 years in the Army, came back with scars no one could see and debts that wouldn't stop piling. Nights were the worst for me. The dark pressing too close, every sound sharpening into something that felt like danger. I thought ranger work in Yellowstone would give me peace, maybe a reset, something quiet. But here I was in a wooden tower, shaking with each knock, more terrified than I'd ever been overseas. The knocking stopped. Silence spread through the forest, the kind that doesn't feel empty but full, like the trees themselves were waiting. I told myself it was an animal, a branch in the wind, anything that would let me unclench my fists. Then a voice came through the radio, soft, broken with static. "Daniel," it said, clear as my own name. My blood froze. Rowan had warned me about this too. Rule 2. If the radio calls your name more than once, don't answer. My hand shook as I turned the volume down, but the voice didn't stop. "Daniel," it repeated, calm, like it knew me. I pressed my palms against my eyes, whispering, you're not real," but it sounded too close, too practiced. That's when I realized something I hadn't before. The rules weren't just guidelines, they were a shield. And whatever was outside, whatever was calling my name, was testing the edges of it, waiting for me to slip. The knocking from that first night never really left me. Even after the sun came up and the forest looked normal again, as if nothing had happened, Chief Rowan came by Tower 6 the next morning, carrying 2 thermoses of coffee like he'd been doing this routine for decades. He handed me one and asked how the shift went. His tone casual, but his eyes didn't leave mine. I thought about lying, saying it was quiet, but the memory of the knocks and the radio voice were still burning in my head. Someone was outside, I told him flatly. At least it sounded like it. He nodded once, not surprised, and said, "And?" I hesitated, then admitted, "They said my name over the radio, twice." Rowan lit a cigarette and leaned against the railing. "And you didn't answer, right?" I shook my head. He blew smoke into the morning air and said, "Then you followed the rule. That's why you're still here." The way he said it sent a shiver through me. He didn't say that's good or that's the right thing. He said that's why you're still here, like if I had answered, I wouldn't be standing on that tower anymore. He didn't explain further, just patted the railing and told me to get some rest. But I didn't rest. The thought that there was something outside the tower, something with a voice, left my chest tight all day. That night I was paired with Lena. She had been working Tower 4 for a couple of weeks and knew the routines better than I did, but she carried herself with a kind of restless energy, like a spring wound too tight. We hiked together at dusk, splitting at the fork where she'd go to her post and I'd climb Tower 6. She flicked her lighter a couple of times as we walked, but I noticed she never actually smoked. When I asked, she laughed without humor. "Quit last year," she said, "but sometimes my hands need something to do." She looked me over. "You look like hell. First night got to you?" I didn't answer, which was answer enough. She just nodded. "Don't worry. It always does." The first hours of the shift were uneventful, just paperwork and the occasional sound of elk moving in the dark. I started to think maybe the night before had been some stress-induced trick, my brain messing with me in the silence. But around 1:30 a.m., the radio crackled to life. "Daniel," a voice said, soft and clear. My chest tightened. I picked up the receiver but didn't press the button. Then the voice came again, sharper this time. "Daniel, can you hear me?" It was Lena's voice. I exhaled hard and finally pressed the button. "I'm here," I said. "You need something?" Silence. Then the radio hissed and popped before the voice came back. "Daniel, Daniel, Daniel." Same tone, same voice, repeating my name in an endless loop. My stomach dropped. Rule 2. If the radio calls your name more than once, don't answer. I dropped the receiver back in its cradle and shoved my chair away from the desk, my hands clammy. The radio kept going, Lena's voice repeating my name with no pause, no break, not even the small breaths real people take. I stared at it like it was alive, my jaw tight. At 2:10, the loop finally stopped. A minute later, the radio buzzed again. But this time it was Lena's real voice, hurried and clipped. "Daniel, do you copy? Over." I grabbed the receiver and nearly shouted into it. "What the hell was that?" She paused. "What are you talking about?" I clenched my teeth. "You were calling my name for half an hour straight." Her voice rose, defensive. "No, I wasn't. My radio's been dead quiet. I only just checked in now." My pulse pounded in my ears. Either she was lying or something else had borrowed her voice the same way it had borrowed mine the night before. "Listen carefully," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If you ever hear me calling your name more than once, don't answer. Understand?" She snorted. "I don't need a lecture. I know the rules." Then softer, almost to herself. "But I don't think the rules are enough." That last line stuck with me. The rules were all we had, a piece of paper with instructions that didn't explain, only warned. And if Lena was right, if even the rules weren't enough anymore, then what were we doing here? Around 3 out, I heard footsteps circling the base of Tower 6, slow and deliberate. I shined my flashlight down but saw nothing, only shadows moving where shadows shouldn't be. Then the radio flared again, Rowan's voice this time. "Cole, open the door. I need to come up." My heart pounded. I pressed the button. "Chief, is that you?" "Over." Silence. Then again, same tone, same cadence. "Cole, open the door. I need to come up." Something in the way it repeated word for word like a recording froze me to the bone. I didn't answer. The radio clicked off. The footsteps stopped. At dawn, Rowan met us at the station. Lena didn't look at him, didn't say a word, just poured herself a mug of black coffee and sat in the corner. I told him what had happened. He didn't look surprised, just tired. "They're testing you," he said. "They always test the new ones harder." I asked him what they were, who they were, but he only shook his head. "Doesn't matter. All that matters is you don't break." Lena slammed her mug on the table hard enough to slosh coffee onto the floor. "Don't break?" she snapped. "They're in our radios, in our heads, and you're telling us not to break? That's not a plan, that's suicide." Rowan just lit another cigarette, his hand trembling slightly as he raised it. "It's the only plan we've got." That was when I noticed the tremor in his fingers. It wasn't nerves, not exactly. More like something deeper, something constant. I caught Lena staring at it too, her jaw tight. A look passed between us, unspoken but heavy. If Rowan had been here for 15 years, if he'd survived this long, then maybe he wasn't entirely human anymore. Maybe Henderson's warning wasn't wrong. That day I sat with the rule sheet in my lap, reading each line over and over until the paper blurred. Rule 1, don't open the door after midnight. Rule 2, don't answer the radio if it calls your name more than once. Rule 3, don't follow the whistles. They seemed simple, but they weren't simple at all. They weren't instructions for how to live. They were instructions for how to not die. And even then, I wasn't sure they would save us for much longer. By the third night, I was already running on caffeine and nerves. The forest outside never felt still to me anymore. Every gust of wind made me check the windows twice. Every creak of the tower sounded like footsteps. But Rowan insisted I needed to get out of the box and stretch my legs. So he sent Lena and me on a joint patrol along the southern ridge. The air was colder that night, sharp enough to sting the lungs, the moon hidden behind heavy clouds that kept everything in shadow. Lena walked ahead of me, her flashlight beam bouncing across the dirt trail, and I could see her shoulders were tense, jaw working like she was grinding her teeth. I tried to lighten the mood, asking if this was standard procedure or if Rowan just wanted to test us, but she didn't look back, only muttered, "He wants to see if we break." That answer sat in my gut like a stone. We were a mile into the trail when it happened, faint at first, like the sound of a bird call, except cleaner, sharper. 3 high notes rising one after another in the distance, echoing through the trees. I froze mid-step. The sound came again, 3 whistles, evenly spaced, deliberate. Every hair on the back of my neck stood up because I'd read that line on the rules so many times I could recite it in my sleep. If you hear 3 whistles in the forest, turn and go the other way. My throat went dry. I whispered, "Did you hear that?" Lena raised her light toward the tree line, her eyes narrowed. "It could be a camper, someone lost," she said, already taking a step forward. I grabbed her arm, pulling her back. No, it's the third rule. We turned back. She yanked her arm free, glaring at me. What if it's not? What if it's some kid freezing out there? You're really gonna leave someone to die because of a list on a piece of paper? My pulse was pounding, the memory of the knocking and the radio loop fresh in my head, and I hissed, "That's exactly why we're alive. Because we listened. You break one, you're gone." Henderson, Collins, whoever they were, they broke a rule and they didn't come back. The whistles came again, closer this time, almost mocking, the exact same pitch, like a recording played back. Lena's flashlight beam shook slightly, betraying her nerves, but she clenched her jaw and started forward again. I blocked her path, stepping right in front of her. "Don't," I said firmly. "I'm not losing you to this." Her voice cracked slightly as she snapped back. "And what if Rowan's rules are bullshit? What if he's just keeping us in line?" The air around us felt charged, thick, like the forest was holding its breath, waiting for which one of us would move first. Then a new sound broke through. The crunch of leaves underfoot, heavy and deliberate, like someone walking just beyond the edge of the trail. We both swung our flashlights toward the noise, beams cutting through fog that hadn't been there a moment before. The shape of a figure flickered between the trees, tall, broad-shouldered, standing perfectly still when the light touched it. For a heartbeat, I thought it was Rowan, but the figure didn't move, didn't speak, only raised its hand and whistled. 3 notes, exact and precise. Lena flinched, whispered, "Jesus Christ," and I grabbed her wrist, dragging her back down the trail the way we'd come. The figure didn't follow, but the whistles kept echoing behind us, bouncing from tree to tree until I couldn't tell if they were ahead or behind. We ran until the station lights came into view. Inside, Lena collapsed onto a chair, her face pale, breathing hard. Rowan was waiting, and for the first time I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not surprise, but recognition, like he'd expected this. "You heard them," he said. Lena slammed her hands on the table. "We didn't just hear them, we saw someone, a man." He whistled. Rowan lit a cigarette, his hand trembling slightly as he took the first drag. "Not a man," he said. "Not anymore," I demanded. "Then what the hell are they?" Rowan exhaled smoke and said, "Borrowed faces, that's what Henderson called them. They don't just mimic your voice, they test your instincts. If you break the rule, they win." Lena stood furious. "So we're supposed to do nothing? Just turn our backs while they walk around the woods?" Rowan's voice hardened. "You follow the rules or you end up like Collins. You want to join him? Be my guest." He stormed out, leaving the smoke hanging in the air like a warning. That night, alone in Tower 6, I couldn't stop replaying the moment the figure raised its hand. The way it had looked exactly like a person. Exactly like Rowan for a split second before the light shifted. I wrote it all down in the journal I kept under my bunk. Every sound, every word, because some part of me believed the more I documented, the more I could make sense of it. But nothing about it made sense. If the borrowed faces could whistle, walk, and mimic us, what stopped them from doing more? My hands shook as I wrote because deep down I knew the answer. Nothing. The rules weren't stopping them. The rules were stopping us. At dawn, Lena came by Tower 6, her face hard but her eyes still wide from the night before. She didn't say a word at first, just lit her lighter, flicked it twice without a cigarette, then shut it. Finally, she muttered, "I almost went. If you hadn't pulled me back, I would have followed." Her voice cracked and she looked away. I told her, "That's what they want. To make us doubt. To make us break." She shook her head. "Or maybe Rowan wants the same thing. Did you see his face? He knew. He knew what they were and he let us walk into it." Her suspicion was contagious. I wanted to defend Rowan, but the memory of his trembling hand and flat answers gnawed at me. Maybe he was hiding something. Maybe he'd already broken a rule long ago and just never admitted it. Either way, the third rule wasn't just words anymore. It was real, and the forest had a way of reminding us that the rules weren't suggestions. They were survival. I didn't sleep after finding the camper's notebook. The words etched across those pages haunted me. Rules we'd never seen. Warnings too specific to be inventions. And the thought that someone outside our circle had been writing them down shook me more than I wanted to admit. Rowan's outburst only made it worse. He wasn't just hiding things, he was cracking. And if he fell apart, then the last thread holding us together would snap. By the time night came again, I was wired and raw. Every sound outside Tower 6 felt amplified. The wind groaning through the pines sounded like whispers. The floor creaks like footsteps. Then around midnight, the radio hissed and Lena's voice came through, sharp and panicked. "Daniel, you need to get down here now." I grabbed the receiver. "Where are you?" She panted into the line. "Base of Tower 6, hurry!" My blood chilled. I looked at the locked steel door, the ladder still up. The rule burning in my head. Never open the tower door after midnight. I pressed the button. "Lena, if you're really down there, tell me what you said to me this morning." "On the trail." Silence, then her voice, steady now. "I told you if you hadn't pulled me back from the whistles, I'd be gone." My heart lurched because she had said that. Word for word, I stood frozen, staring at the door. The handle rattled. Then a voice drifted up from below, not from the radio but from outside. The exact same tone. "Daniel, it's me, let me up. Please." My legs locked, sweat beating on my forehead, because the voice carried just enough tremor to feel real, human. I forced myself back to the desk, writing in the notebook to keep my hands steady. If it was Lena, then breaking the rule meant letting her in and risking everything. If it wasn't Lena, then opening that door meant the end. I tried the radio again. "Lena, where are you right now?" The line hissed before her voice replied. Distant but clear. "Tower 4, why?" My throat tightened. I gripped the desk hard enough my knuckles whitened. Then the voice outside shouted again, angrier now. "Daniel!" "Open the damn door," the words cut sharp, and I felt bile rise in my throat because it wasn't just Lena's voice anymore. It was mine, my own voice yelling at me from below. I stumbled back, flashlight beam shaking as I pointed it toward the window, and I saw it standing at the base of the tower, looking up with my face, my stance, even the small scar across my jawline. It smiled, a slow, deliberate curl of lips, and called up, "We don't need the rules anymore." I gripped the flashlight so tight my hand cramped, whispering to myself, "Not real, not real." But then it said something that turned my veins to ice. Fallujah, the alley. Remember, my chest seized. No one alive knew that, not even Lena, not Rowan, only me. The voice cracked with emotion that mirrored mine when I thought about that night overseas. And I couldn't breathe because if it knew that, then it wasn't just copying my face. It had crawled into my head. Lena's voice snapped across the radio. "Daniel, what's going on? Talk to me." I wanted to tell her, but I couldn't find words. The thing outside kept talking, switching voices like changing masks. One moment Lena begging, the next Rowan commanding, the next my own mother's voice calling my name the way she had when I was a boy. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the voices still pushed inside. "Open the door, Daniel, you don't have to be afraid. We're already inside." I don't know how long it went on. Minutes maybe. Then silence slammed down, the figure gone when I dared glance out again. The forest empty like nothing had happened. But my body shook with aftershocks, my brain screaming at me that if they could pull memories out of me, then there was no safety left. The rules weren't a shield anymore, just a delaying tactic. At dawn, Lena climbed up Tower 6, slamming the hatch shut behind her, eyes blazing. What the hell happened last night? I handed her the notebook, my writing from the night covering whole pages. She read silently, her hands trembling. When she reached the part about what it had said, her voice cracked. "It knew, Daniel, it knew about your past." I nodded, jaw tight. "If it can take that from me, what else can it take?" She looked sick, muttering. "Then it's not just voices and faces anymore, it's memories." We sat in silence, both of us staring at the rule sheet pinned to the wall, the words feeling thinner than ever. Rowan arrived later, his face gray with exhaustion, and Lena threw the notebook at him, the pages fluttering open to the line about Fallujah. She snapped, "You said they mimic, but you didn't say they dig. You didn't say they steal what's inside us." Rowan rubbed his temples, cigarette dangling between his fingers. "Because if I told you that on day one you'd have run, and running doesn't save you, it just gives them more ground." His voice cracked at the edges, the mask slipping for the first time. He looked at us with haunted eyes. Henderson used to hear his dead wife every night, begging him to come outside. Sometimes he'd almost believe her. Sometimes he'd almost jump. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping. And one morning I woke up and he was gone. No sign of struggle, no blood, just gone. Like he'd been erased. That's what they do when they get inside. They make you erase yourself. His hand shook so hard he nearly dropped the cigarette. Lena whispered, "How long before it happens to us?" Rowan didn't answer, just turned away and muttered, "Long enough if you hold the line, short if you break," then left us in the thick smoke of his wake. That night I sat in the tower again, the notebook open in front of me, staring at the line the camper had written. "If they learn your full name, Leave immediately. The thought gnawed at me. They already knew mine. They had spoken it in my mother's voice, in my own voice. I couldn't stop thinking maybe it was already too late. Maybe every word I wrote in this journal was just fuel for them. But I couldn't stop writing either, because if I didn't leave a record, then there'd be nothing left of me when they finally erased what was real. The morning after the whistles, the forest felt wrong, heavy in a way I couldn't shake. Like every tree was leaning closer to listen. Rowan sent Lena and me out again. Not south this time, but east toward the lakeside campground, a place that should have been busy this time of year but was dead quiet when we arrived. No smoke from fires, no voices, just silence. We found the ranger log clipped to the board, and the last entry was a check-in from a single camper named Adam Price, a 22-year-old who'd come out alone with nothing but a tent and a pack. According to the sheet, he'd been due out that morning, but the site was empty. His car still in the lot, the keys inside, doors unlocked. Lena crouched by the trunk and said, "Nobody leaves their keys behind," her voice flat. I felt my gut tighten because she was right. We followed the dirt trail down to the lake where the campsites were, and that's when we found the tent. The flap open, the sleeping bag unrolled but empty. A half-burned fire pit still smoldering like he'd left in the middle of the night. Beside it were his boots neatly placed side by side. Too neat, like someone had staged them. Lena cursed under her breath. Not again. And unzipped the pack lying against the tent. Inside were clothes, food, and a small leather-bound notebook. She handed it to me and I flipped through, the handwriting cramped but careful, and my blood froze when I saw the words scrawled across the first page. The rules. I read the list, heart pounding, because they weren't just similar to ours. They were the same, word for word. Don't open the door after midnight. Don't answer the radio if it calls your name more than once. Don't follow the whistles, but there were more. Rules I had never seen. One read, "If they learn your full name, leave immediately." Another said, "If you find a mirror in the woods, don't look at it." Lena leaned over my shoulder, whispering, "What the hell is this?" I flipped further, finding entries dated the last 2 nights. Short lines like field notes. Heard knocking near Tower 6. Whistles near the ridge. Dreamed of faces I don't recognize. The last entry stopped me cold. It was dated yesterday. They spoke my name in my father's voice. They said they already replaced me. The pen stroke ended mid-sentence. Trailing off across the page, I looked around, scanning the empty site. The still water of the lake. The tree line dark with shadow. And my skin crawled because it felt like we were standing inside someone else's story that hadn't finished yet. Lena stuffed the notebook into her jacket and said, "Rowan has to see this," but her voice shook. Like even she didn't believe he'd give us real answers. We carried everything back to the station, boots, pack, tent tag, and laid it on the table in front of him. Rowan flipped through the notebook slowly, his face unreadable, but I saw his hand tremble again as he reached the line about being replaced. Lena slammed her palm on the table. "You told us the rules came from Henderson, from the Rangers. So how the hell does some random kid in the woods have them too?" Rowan closed the notebook, exhaled smoke, and said, "Because the forest doesn't just test us. It tests anyone who comes close. Sometimes they write the rules down too. Sometimes they don't make it far enough to matter." His calm tone snapped something in me. "Don't make it far enough? Is that what you call vanishing without a trace? Is that what happened to Collins?" His eyes flicked to me sharp and hard. "Collins broke the rules, and so did this boy," Lena shouted back. "He wrote new ones, things we've never heard. If he knew more than us, then maybe he wasn't wrong. Maybe you're the one hiding things." Rowan stood, slamming his fist against the wall, his cigarette falling to the floor. His voice broke into a shout for the first time since I'd met him. "You think you want the truth? You think you can live with it? But the truth is the rules aren't protection. They're warnings, the only line between you and them. And when someone writes their own list, it's because the forest already has them. Don't you get it? Once they know your name, you're not you anymore." The room fell into silence, only Rowan's ragged breathing filling it. Lena stared at him like he'd just confessed to a crime. I felt my stomach twist, because for a split second he didn't sound like a leader. He sounded like a man at the end of his rope. After he stormed out, Lena pulled the notebook back toward us and flipped to the last page. At the bottom, scrawled faintly like the ink had run dry, was a line we hadn't noticed before. "If you see yourself by the lake, don't let it speak," Lena whispered. Jesus, he saw them. I closed the book, hands trembling, because I realized we hadn't just found evidence of a camper gone missing. We'd found proof that the rules weren't ours alone. They were spreading, carried like infection. And if that was true, then the boundary wasn't just our problem. It was leaking into anyone who stepped too close. That night in Tower 6, I kept the notebook under my bunk, reading the new rules over and over, trying to memorize them the way I had Rowan's list. But the more I read, the more it felt like a countdown. Like every line was one step closer to the end. And when the radio hissed at 2 a.m., whispering my name in a voice that wasn't mine, I nearly answered. Because the notebook had planted the worst thought in my head. What if I'd already been replaced and just didn't know it yet? Rowan didn't give us a choice. The night after the thing wore my face and spoke my memories, he came to Tower 6 just before dusk. His voice tighter than usual, telling us to pack light. No questions and follow him. Lena shot me a look, suspicion plain on her face, but we both strapped on our packs and followed him down the ridge into the thickest part of the forest. The air grew colder the deeper we went. Silence pressing in until even our footsteps felt like trespassing. Rowan didn't speak, just smoked one cigarette after another. The tremor in his hand worse than I'd ever seen. After an hour, the trees opened up into a clearing I hadn't known existed. The ground sloped downward into a shallow basin where stone pillars jutted up from the earth in a perfect spiral, each one blackened, cracked, leaning slightly as though heat had warped them. Mist coiled from the center like breath from an open wound. My stomach twisted just looking at it, Lena whispered. "What the hell is this?" Rowan exhaled smoke and said, "The spiral of stones, the place where it started." I crouched at the edge, peering down at the fissure that pulsed faint light beneath the fog, a low hum vibrating in my bones. "Started?" I asked. Voice hollow. Rowan nodded, his face gray. "In 73, a team came here, scientists, military, rangers. They called it Project Northwatch. The idea was simple. Measure it, monitor it, contain it. But they didn't understand it wasn't a fire to be put out. It was a door, and once the door cracked open, you can't close it. You can only hold it." Lena shook her head, backing away. "You're telling us this has been here for 50 years and no one outside knows?" Rowan's laugh was bitter. "Oh, they knew for a while until the funding dried up and the files got buried. Henderson was one of the last original crew. He stayed when everyone else pulled out. And when he wrote the first set of rules, the Forest Service pretended it was policy. But really, it was a leash. Something to keep the ones stationed here from panicking until it was their turn to vanish." The words hung heavy in the mist. I forced myself to ask, "Why show us now?" Rowan's eyes met mine, bloodshot and raw. "Because after what happened at your tower last night, after it wore your face, it means the fissure is growing again. You needed to see it with your own eyes so you'd understand this isn't about rules on paper. It's about survival against something that doesn't end." Lena's voice cracked. "And what about the camper, Price? He wrote rules we never saw, rules you never told us. He was tested too." Rowan's jaw clenched. "Anyone who comes close is tested. The forest doesn't care if you're a ranger or a hiker. Once it knows your name, it keeps it." He tapped his temple. "Forever." I stared at the spiral, the mist curling upward, and felt that hum pulling at me like gravity, like it wanted me to step closer. Lena grabbed my arm hard, dragging me back, her face pale. "Don't look at it too long, I can feel it. Like it's inside my head." Rowan crushed his cigarette underfoot. "That's why there's a rule about never staring into the center. It wasn't written for fun. It was written because Henderson's partner sat right there one night and never stood up again. He just kept watching until his eyes went blank. And then he was gone." My chest tightened. The stories I'd been forcing myself to treat as superstition had flesh here. Lena turned on Rowan, anger breaking through her fear. "So that's it, we're just... what? Guards on a crumbling lock, feeding ourselves to this thing until it swallows us whole?" Rowan's voice cracked like dry wood. "You think I wanted this job? You think I wanted to be the one to carry it after Henderson vanished? I've been out here 15 years watching people come and go. Every one of them thinking they'll be the one to last, and every one of them broken by it. The only reason I'm still standing is because I don't fight the rules. I live by them even when they don't make sense. Especially then." His hand shook so hard, lighting the next cigarette, he nearly dropped the match. Lena muttered, "Or maybe you're not still standing. Maybe they already have you." The words cut sharp and Rowan's head snapped toward her, fury flashing before he caught himself, and the silence after was worse than shouting. I felt caught between them, suspicion spreading through me too. Because if Henderson had been replaced, who was to say Rowan hadn't been? The tremor in his hands, the way he dodged questions, it all lined up too neatly. I backed away from the spiral, trying to breathe. When the fog shifted and for a second I saw movement inside the fissure. Not shadows but figures, countless, pressing against the thin skin of reality. Faces blurred but almost recognizable, I stumbled, whispering, "They're in there." Rowan grabbed my arm, voice harsh. "Don't give them more than you already have." He pulled me back toward the trail, Lena following reluctantly. Every step away from the spiral felt like climbing against a current, like it wanted us to stay, wanted us to listen longer. Once the trees closed behind us, I could breathe again, but the hum still echoed in my bones. Rowan led us back without another word. When we reached the station, he finally stopped, turned to us and said, "Now you know, so if you were thinking about quitting, forget it. There's no leaving once you've seen the spiral. The only way out is the same way Henderson left, and none of you want that." Then he walked inside, leaving us standing in the cold. Lena lit her lighter again, her hands trembling. "I don't trust him," she whispered. "Not anymore." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that Rowan was still human, but the truth was I wasn't sure. Not after seeing the spiral, not after feeling it pull at me. And as I climbed back into Tower 6 that night, the forest too quiet around me, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe Rowan was right about one thing. Once you've seen it, you're already part of it, whether you want to be or not. 2 nights after Rowan showed us the spiral, I still couldn't sleep. The hum from that fissure had dug into my bones like a sickness, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw shapes pressing against the mist, faces half-formed, whispering names that weren't mine yet somehow belonged to me. Lena and I barely spoke. Not because we didn't want to, but because every time our eyes met, the same unspoken thought hung between us. What if one of us had already been taken? What if the pull of that place had carved something out and replaced it with something else? Rowan kept himself locked in his office, chain smoking until the whole station reeked like ash. Then just before dawn, he called me into the storage shed behind the station, his voice rough, telling me to dig through the old supply boxes stacked against the far wall. I didn't ask why, I just obeyed. Anything was better than sitting in the tower waiting for the next voice to crawl into my head. I shifted crates until I found a dented metal box marked with fading letters. Henderson. The lock had rusted to nothing, so I pried it open. Inside were notebooks eaten by mold, a cracked flashlight, and at the bottom a cassette tape in a clear plastic case with one word scrawled on the label in shaky handwriting. Rules. My stomach tightened as I held it up. Rowan stared at it too long before finally saying, "Play it." But only once. His hand trembled as he lit another cigarette. I dusted off the old tape player on the desk, clicked the cassette inside, and pressed play. At first there was nothing but static, then a man's voice came through. Rough, tired, worn like leather. "This is Ranger Henderson. Day 4317 at Tower 6. I don't know if anyone will hear this, but I have to leave something behind. The rules we've lived by aren't ours. We didn't write them. We only copied them. The forest writes them. The forest tests them, and when you fail, you don't die. You're borrowed?" The word cracked with static. "I've seen them, faces I knew, faces I loved. Calling to me from outside the tower, my wife, my boy, my own damn reflection. But they aren't them, they're never them. Don't listen, don't believe, don't open, never open. But there's one more, one I never wrote down, because writing it makes it real. Rule 12. When the voices stop asking and start remembering, it means you've already lost. And there's nothing left to keep you here." The tape hissed and skipped. Then his voice returned raw. "Rowan doesn't understand. Or maybe he does and he just doesn't tell you. Project Northwatch failed because you can't contain a memory once it leaks. You can't lock up something that knows your name. Once they start using what's inside you, once they make you doubt what you lived through, you're already gone. I've been gone for a long time. I just haven't stopped moving yet." Then the tape ended in a burst of static, the player clicking silent. I sat frozen, hands numb, because Henderson hadn't just been warning us. He'd been confessing, and Rule 12 wasn't like the others. It wasn't a wall to keep them out. It was a death sentence for when they got in. Lena burst into the shed, eyes wild, demanding. "What did you just play?" I rewound it. Press play again. But this time only static filled the room. No voice, no rules, nothing, Rowan cursed under his breath, grinding his cigarette into the desk. "I told you only once," Lena shouted. "Why?" "Why only once?" Rowan's voice cracked. "Because it only lets itself be heard when it wants to. That tape isn't just a recording. It's a mirror. Henderson's still out there. Or what's left of him. And he wants us to remember. His words made my skin crawl. I snapped. You knew about Rule 12 all along. Rowan didn't meet my eyes, just muttered. Some truths are worse than ignorance. Lena slammed her fist on the desk. No, you don't get to decide what we can handle. You've been feeding us scraps while we're hunted like animals. She was shaking, her lighter clutched so hard it nearly snapped. I grabbed her wrist gently, trying to ground her. But my own hands were trembling too because I couldn't stop replaying Henderson's words. When the voices start remembering, it means you've already lost. Last night outside Tower 6, it hadn't just mimicked Lena. It had mimicked me. It had remembered Fallujah. It had remembered something I'd buried so deep I barely admitted it to myself. Had I already lost and just didn't know it? That night on shift, the radio stayed quiet for hours. Almost too quiet, the silence felt staged, heavy, like the forest itself was waiting. Around 2 a.m., I scribbled in the notebook to keep sane, writing Henderson's warning over and over. Rule 12, Rule 12, Rule 12, as if repetition might keep it at bay. Then faintly from beyond the tree line, I heard it. Not whistles, not knocking, but a voice singing low and cracked. An old lullaby I hadn't heard since childhood. My mother's voice, every word perfect, every note just slightly off. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood, whispering to myself, "They're remembering." The notebook slid from my hands, and for the first time since I took the job, I wasn't sure the rules could save me anymore. Henderson had been right, writing them down wasn't protection. It was just a reminder of how close we were to breaking. Rowan didn't send us, we went on our own. Maybe that was the first mistake. Maybe by then, Lena and I were too far gone to trust anyone but ourselves. 2 nights after Henderson's tape, I couldn't take sitting in the tower anymore, listening to lullabies and voices that shouldn't exist. So when Lena came up pale and shaking, saying she'd seen smoke by the eastern ridge, I didn't hesitate. We packed light and went before Rowan could stop us. The hike took us into a part of Yellowstone that felt wrong before we even saw it. The trees blackened and twisted from an old fire, trunks hollowed out like corpses, ash still clinging to bark decades later. The ground brittle under our boots. Lena muttered, "They call this the burned zone." "Right," I nodded. Rowan said it was off limits. She gave a bitter laugh. "Everything out here's off limits." The trail ended in a clearing where a cabin sagged against itself. Roof half collapsed, windows boarded from the inside. The smell of smoke still clung even though the fire was years past. I pushed the door and it groaned open, dust spilling out like breath. Inside was worse. Walls scorched black, furniture charred skeletons. But on the far wall, pinned under melted glass, were photographs, rows of them. Rangers in uniform smiling in front of towers. Each photo marked with a thick red slash across the face and one word written in black marker, "Replaced." My chest went cold as I stepped closer. The names under the photos matched the ones Rowan had mentioned in passing. Collins, Henderson, 3 others I didn't know. And at the very end of the row, a photo of Rowan himself. But his face wasn't slashed, not yet. Lena's hands shook as she ripped one photo off the wall, shoving it at me. He knew. He's been cataloging us like animals. Who's real, who's not? I shook my head. Or maybe this isn't his work, maybe it's theirs. She froze at that, glancing back at the photos, and whispered, "Then why keep his up there?" Before I could answer, a sound came from the doorway, soft, careful footsteps crunching ash. I spun, flashlight cutting through the cabin, and my heart stopped. Standing there was Lena. Not beside me, but in the doorway, another her, clothes clean, skin unburned by smoke, hair perfect, eyes too wide. She smiled at me and said, "Daniel, remember the river when I slipped and you pulled me back?" You laughed even though I cried. My blood froze, because she'd told me that story only once in a quiet moment. Never written down, never spoken in front of Rowan. The Lena beside me cursed, gun drawn. "Don't listen, it's not me." But the double stepped closer, hands raised, tears in her eyes. "Don't you see, she's the fake, I'm the one who remembers. I'm the one who's real," my vision swam. 2 voices identical, 2 sets of eyes pleading. Lena shoved me hard. "Don't believe it, shoot it." But the other Lena sobbed. "You know I don't smoke anymore. You've seen me flick the lighter. I do it when I'm nervous, please Daniel, don't let her kill me." My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the flashlight. Both of them staring at me. Both of them knowing things only Lena should know. I backed against the wall, shouting, "Stop it! Stop!" But they only stepped closer, speaking over each other. Memories spilling from their mouths like weapons. The smell of smoke thick in my lungs, the word "replaced" burning in my head. And for a second I thought maybe that was the truth. Maybe Lena had already been replaced back at the spiral. Maybe I'd been walking with a shadow all along, the real one trapped, the fake one guiding me deeper. My chest heaved. I aimed the light at the double and screamed, "What's Rule 3?" She smiled through tears. "Don't follow the whistles." And my knees buckled because she didn't just know the rules. She spoke them like prayer. The Lena beside me fired a shot, the bullet tearing into the double's chest. Ash sprang, the thing staggered but didn't fall, only stared at me with hurt in its eyes before dissolving into smoke that curled back into the fissure of the walls. Gone in seconds, silence crashing down, my ears ringing. Lena grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. "Look at me, it's me, I'm real, you hear me?" I nodded, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling, because the truth was I wasn't sure anymore. Not sure of her, not sure of myself, not sure of anything. We stumbled out of the cabin into the cold night. The photos still burning in my mind, the word replaced scratched deep. Lena wiped sweat from her forehead and muttered, "They're not just copying, they're infiltrating. They're making us doubt until we do the work for them." I couldn't answer, too shaken. As we hiked back, I kept glancing at her silhouette in the flashlight beam, waiting for it to slip, to fracture, to reveal another mask, but it never did. When we finally reached Tower 6, I collapsed into the chair. Staring at the rule sheet pinned to the wall, it looked smaller now, weaker, Henderson's voice from the tape whispering about Rule 12 echoing in my skull. Lena paced the floor, muttering, "If they can take my memories, they can take anyone's. Rowan's yours, mine. It's only a matter of time." And for the first time, I didn't argue because deep down I knew she was right. The night after the burned zone, the forest did not sleep. Neither did I. The tower shook with every gust of wind, though the air was still. The ground trembled under my boots when I stepped outside. Faint at first, like distant thunder, then stronger. A steady pulse I could feel in my teeth. The spiral was moving. I didn't need Rowan to tell me. I could feel it, I could hear it, a low hum spreading through the trees like blood through veins. Lena burst into Tower 6 around midnight, her face pale, shouting, "It's happening! They're breaching!" Before I could respond, the radio erupted with static. Then Rowan's voice cut through, ragged and broken. "Stay in the towers, don't go near the spiral. For God's sake, don't go near it." Then silence. The radio dead as if ripped from the world. Outside, the forest roared, not with wind but with voices. Hundreds overlapping, whispering names, shouting memories, crying like children, laughing like friends long dead. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't just around me, it was inside me. Lena grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "They're coming, Daniel. They're not hiding anymore." And then we saw them. Shapes moved between the trees. Dozens at first, then hundreds, flickering in and out of the moonlight. Their steps too smooth, too precise. One by one, they came into view at the base of Tower 6. Faces sharp in the glow of my flashlight, my face, Lena's face, Rowan's face. All doubled, tripled, endless reflections. They stared up with eyes that didn't blink. Lips moving in unison, whispering our names. Then louder, speaking things they shouldn't know. Daniel, Fallujah, the alley, the boy with the red kite. Remember. My knees buckled because that memory was mine alone. Buried deep, never spoken. But the voice said it with the exact tremor my own voice carried when I thought about it in the dark. Lena clutched my sleeve, whispering, "They're in us. They're inside." Her double stepped forward, smiling with her nervous flick of the lighter. Even mimicking the way her hand shook, it spoke to me, not her. "You don't have to protect her anymore. Daniel, I'm the one you pulled from the river. I'm the one who told you she would have followed the whistles. Don't you remember?" The real Lena screamed, firing a warning shot into the ground, but the copy didn't flinch. It only tilted its head and whispered, "She's already been replaced. You've been walking with me all along." My flashlight shook as I swung it across the crowd, more of them emerging. Some I recognized, some I didn't. Faces of rangers from the photos in the cabin. Faces of strangers I'd passed on streets years ago. Faces of family I hadn't seen since before the war. All staring, all whispering pieces of me. I stumbled back, gasping. This isn't real, but the truth was worse. It was real, too real. They weren't inventing lies. They were feeding me truths I couldn't escape. Every secret, every wound dragged into the open. I felt something crack in my chest as one of the doubles stepped forward wearing my uniform. My scars, my tired eyes, it spoke with my exact voice. "You already know, Daniel. You're not the original anymore. You were replaced at the spiral, you felt it. The hum in your bones wasn't outside, it was inside. You've been one of us since that night, my vision blurred, panic clawing at me because some part of me believed it. The nights of silence, the lullabies, the way the fisher pulled at me. What if they were right? What if I'd already been erased and didn't notice? Lena shook me hard, shouting, "Don't listen. Don't give them ground." But her voice was drowned by the chorus below, hundreds of Daniels shouting in unison, hundreds of Lenas, hundreds of Rowans all overlapping, the sound of physical force pressing into the tower walls. The ground shook harder, a crack ripping through the trees toward us, the spiral pushing outward, light searing the mist in the distance. The doubles began to climb, hands pulling at the steel, faces pressed against the walls, their skin cold against the metal, their mouths moving in sync. "Rule 12, they chanted. "Rule 12, Rule 12. Over and over my ears rang, blood trickling from my nose. Lena fired again and again into the mass, but it didn't stop them. Didn't even slow them. Every bullet passed through like smoke. They laughed with her own laughter. They cried with her own voice, and I couldn't tell anymore if the Lena beside me was firing or if it was another reflection pulling the trigger. My hands shook as I grabbed the rule sheet from the wall, staring at the words, each one fading, the ink bleeding into the paper until it was blank, every line gone except one faint scribble at the bottom I hadn't noticed before. Handwriting different from Rowan's, from mine, from anyone I knew. When the rules disappear, so will you. My chest seized. I dropped the paper, whispering, "We're already gone." Lena grabbed me, screaming, "Look at me, I'm real, you're real. Hold on." But her face blurred, doubled, tripled, until the entire tower was filled with Lenas. Everyone shouting, crying, whispering secrets that only she and I had shared. My vision narrowed to a tunnel, the roar of voices breaking into static. And in that moment, I didn't know if I was still Daniel Cole or just another borrowed memory walking in circles around a spiral of stones that would never close. When dawn finally came, the forest looked calm again. Too calm, as if the night of screaming voices and endless doubles had been nothing more than a fever dream. But the ground still carried faint vibrations and the spiral still hummed through my bones. Rowan called us to the station without explanation, his voice over the radio low and cracked, not demanding this time but pleading. When we arrived, he was sitting at the long table with a stack of folders spread before him, his cigarette burned to the filter without him noticing, his eyes hollow from a night with no sleep. Lena slammed her hands on the table the second we walked in. What the hell was that last night? They were everywhere. They knew everything. Don't tell me to follow the rules, tell me the truth. Rowan didn't look up, just pushed one of the folders across to us. Inside were yellowed documents stamped with faded seals. Department of Defense, Project Northwatch, Operational Directive 1973. My stomach tightened as I scanned the pages. Maps of Yellowstone marked with circles, lists of personnel, incident reports describing disappearances classified as containment breaches. Rowan finally spoke, voice gravelly. "Tower 6 isn't a watchtower. It's a lock. All of them are locks built on fractures where the boundary is weakest. Project Northwatch wasn't about monitoring wildlife. It was about monitoring them. The borrowed faces, the spiral. Everything you've seen, we were supposed to measure, to hold the line until someone figured out how to close it, but no one ever did. So the project ended on paper. They pulled the scientists out, shut down funding, and left the rangers here like sacrificial lambs to keep watch until it all swallowed us. Henderson stayed because he thought the rules might be enough. But the rules were never ours. They were messages, fragments of what the forest allowed us to understand. Half warnings, half traps." Lena's face was pale. She flipped through another report, her voice trembling. "This says there were 20 towers once. Now there are only 6, the others fell." Rowan nodded. "One by one, each breach bigger than the last. Each time the rules changed, grew, multiplied. Every replacement brought them closer. Tower 6 is the last lock in Yellowstone. When it falls, the spiral won't be hidden anymore. It'll consume everything from here to the state line." Silence stretched heavy, my chest tightening as the weight of it sank in. "So what are we?" I asked. "Guards at the edge of the end, just waiting our turn." Rowan looked at me finally, his eyes bloodshot but sharp. "We're not guards, Cole, we're bait. As long as we hold the towers, their focus stays on us. Not the towns, not the highways, not the world outside. You ever wonder why you were recruited? Why they don't send real soldiers or scientists anymore? Because you were disposable. Because no one will ask when you disappear." The words hit harder than any voice outside ever could. Lena laughed bitterly. "So we're not rangers. We're sacrifices. Rowan didn't argue, just lit another cigarette, his hands shaking so badly he had to cup the flame with both palms. Every one of us has a shelf life. Henderson lasted longer than most because he believed, because he wrote it down. I've lasted because I follow every line even when I don't understand it. But that won't save me forever. It won't save you either. Sooner or later, Rule 12 comes for everyone. He coughed hard, a wet sound that rattled in his chest, then pushed another folder forward, this one thinner. Inside was a single page with grainy photos of rangers, each stamped replaced across the face. I froze as I saw Henderson's picture, then Collins, then others I didn't know, and at the bottom Rowan's own photo. The word not stamped but scrawled by hand in black ink, shaky, uneven, replaced. Lena's voice broke. You put this here, didn't you? Rowan's hand trembled as he stubbed out the cigarette. His voice a whisper. Maybe, or maybe they did. Sometimes I don't know anymore. Sometimes I wake up and wonder if I'm still me. If I ever was, but it doesn't matter. The lock is what matters. The tower has to stand. That's all that's left. I felt sick watching him. His honesty worse than lies. Lena slammed the folder shut and shouted, If you don't know if you're real, then how can we trust anything you say? How do we know you're not leading us straight into their hands? Rowan's eyes flicked to me, desperate. Because if I wasn't me, you'd already be gone. You'd already be smoke in the spiral. I've kept you alive this long, haven't I? But even as he said it, his voice cracked, his hand shaking so violently he dropped the cigarette lighter. It clattered across the table, Lena whispered. Or maybe you've kept us alive because they want us alive. Maybe we're not guards, not bait. Maybe we're livestock. The words hung between us like poison. Rowan didn't answer, his silence louder than any denial. That night in Tower 6, I couldn't stop thinking about the folders, about the word replaced scrawled over Rowan's face, about the possibility that Henderson had written Rule 12 not as a warning, but as a confession. The radio hissed just after 2, static thick. Then my own voice came through, calm and steady. Daniel, you know now. You can stop fighting. You were never guarding the spiral. You were feeding it every night you watch. Every rule you follow, you're giving it what it needs. I gripped the receiver so hard my knuckles cracked, whispering, shut up, but the voice kept talking. Rowan knows, Lena suspects. You're the only one who won't admit it. You're already gone. Replaced the night you heard your mother's song. You just haven't stopped moving yet. I dropped the receiver, heart hammering, staring out into the dark where the trees seemed to lean closer. The spirals hummed louder than ever. Henderson's voice from the tape echoed in my head. Once they start remembering, it means you've already lost. I didn't know if I was still me, or if Rowan was right, if none of it mattered. If the only thing that mattered was holding the lock a little longer, before it all fell apart. The night it finally broke, we felt it long before we saw them. The ground shaking in steady pulses like a heartbeat buried under the soil. The air electric with static. Every radio across the outpost clicked on at once, the hiss drowning the room. Then voices layered over it, not one but hundreds, reciting the rules in unison, word for word, their cadence flat and mechanical. Rule 1. Do not open the door after midnight. Rule 2. Do not answer the radio if it calls your name more than once. Rule 3. Do not follow the whistles. Lena clamped her hands over her ears, but it didn't matter. The voices came from the walls, from the floor, from inside our own heads. Each rule spoken in my voice, in her voice, in Rowan's, repeated until I felt like my skull would crack. I stumbled to the window and froze. The clearing below Tower 6 was full, shapes shoulder to shoulder stretching into the trees, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, every face I had ever known staring back, mouths moving in perfect sync. Rule 4. If you hear footsteps circling the tower, remain silent. Rule 5. If you see yourself, do not let it speak. Rule 6. If the rules change, you must obey the new ones. My chest heaved. The page I'd torn from the wall days ago burned in my memory, the ink fading until only one line remained when the rules disappear. So will you. Lena gripped my arm so tight her nails drew blood, her eyes wide and wet. They're building to it, Daniel. They're going to say it. I shook my head, whispering, don't listen. But the chant rolled on, louder, faster. Rule 7. Never look directly into the spiral. Rule 8. Do not accept food or drink left outside your door. Rule 9. If the lights go out, do not move until they return. Rule 10. Never acknowledge the knocking. Rule 11. If you hear someone you love crying, it is not them. Then silence slammed down, so heavy my ears rang. The crowd below perfectly still. Mouths closed, eyes fixed upward on me. Lena's breath hitched. "It's coming." And then the forest spoke with one voice, deeper than thunder, older than anything human. Rule 12. When you begin to doubt yourself, when your memories are no longer yours, when you cannot tell if the voice is inside or outside, you have already been replaced. And the only rule left is to obey. The words cut through me like a blade. My knees gave out and I collapsed against the desk. Every secret fear I'd held confirmed. Every whisper that had told me I wasn't real shouted back at me by the world itself. I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't work, my hands trembling too hard to hold the flashlight. Lena dropped to the floor beside me, shaking me hard, shouting, "You're still here. Daniel, you're still you. Don't let them take it." But the voices rose again, laughter this time. My own laughter echoing from 1,000 throats. "Daniel Cole, you wrote us down, you fed us. You gave us your name, you gave us your war, you gave us your fear. You are ours." The glass in the windows rattled. The tower groaned as if the weight of their words alone could bring it down. Rowan burst through the hatch, his face ash gray, his hands shaking so violently he dropped his rifle on the floor. "Don't answer them. Don't you dare answer them." But his voice was drowned by the chant. "Rule 12, obey, obey, obey," Lena screamed over it, firing her pistol into the crowd, bullets passing through smoke that reformed into faces again. They laughed with her own voice, mocking, mimicking every curse she shouted. Rowan fell to his knees, clutching his head, his voice raw. "They already have me. They've had me for years. Henderson was right. You can't win, you can only delay. Tower 6 is the last lock, and once it falls, it won't matter who's real. It'll all be them." He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot, tears cutting through ash on his face. "That's why you were brought here, not to fight, but to decide. To choose whether to hold the line or to let it break, and if you can't choose, they'll choose for you." His words rang hollow against the roar outside, but something in me latched onto them. The faint shred of agency in a world designed to erase it. I staggered to my feet, gripping the desk, shouting into the radio, though I knew it was pointless. "I am Daniel Cole, I am not yours." The crowd outside fell silent, every face tilting upward, mouths curling into identical smiles. Then in perfect unison they spoke with my own voice. "Then prove it." The ground shook so hard the tower swayed, Lena screamed, grabbing onto the railing. Rowan lay on the floor, whispering to himself, "Rule 12. Rule 12. Rocking back and forth like a man already broken. I stared out at the sea of faces and realized the last rule wasn't just a warning. It was a command. Once you doubted, once you lost your grip, you became them, and the only way to resist was to hold on to whatever shred of self you had left. Even as they tore it away piece by piece, my chest heaved, my vision blurred, and I understood finally what Henderson meant on the tape. I hadn't been guarding the spiral. I'd been guarding myself, and I was losing. The tower didn't fall all at once. It started with the sound. The chorus outside shifting from whispers to screams, every voice layered into one impossible roar. The floorboards groaned under my boots and the air itself seemed to splinter. Rowan was curled in the corner, muttering the rules over and over like prayer, his voice breaking until it was only sobs. Lena was beside me, gripping her rifle so tight her knuckles turned white, her eyes blazing, though I could see the terror underneath. Outside, the borrowed faces pressed closer, their forms no longer distinct, smoke and flesh twisting together into one living tide, their mouths opening wide, too wide, the sound of my own name tearing through the clearing like thunder. I staggered back, clutching the desk. The paper where the rules had once been was gone, nothing but blank wood beneath my hands, and I realized the rules had never been ours to begin with. They were the spiral's leash, and now the leash had snapped. The tower shook harder, bolts rattling loose. Dust raining from the beams, Lena shouted in my ear, "We can't hold this, Daniel, it's over." But I couldn't answer, because a part of me still believed if I followed the rules, even the last one, I might survive. Henderson's voice on that tape played in my head. "When they start remembering, it means you've already lost." And they had remembered everything, every secret, every wound. So maybe I was already gone and just hadn't admitted it. Maybe I was one of them all along. The glass exploded inward, shards raining down as hands reached through. Too many hands, too many faces pressed against the walls. "Every one of them mine," Lena fired wildly. The cracks of her pistol drowned in the roar. Rowan screamed something incoherent, then lurched to his feet and charged at the window, throwing himself into the swarm, his body vanishing into smoke and screams before I could even react. Lena shrieked his name, but it was useless. He was gone. erased as completely as Henderson before him. I grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the ladder, shouting, "We can't stay, we have to move." But she ripped free, her eyes burning. "And go where, Daniel? There's nowhere left, it's already here." Her words were true. The forest below was gone, replaced by a rolling tide of faces and voices, the spiral's mist spreading like a living storm, reaching every tree, every stone, the world itself rewriting around us. I clutched her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. "Then we don't give them what they want, we don't break." She stared at me, tears cutting through the ash on her face, then nodded just once. The smallest shred of defiance left. The tower leaned with a groan that sounded like the end of the world. Beams snapping, wood splintering. I grabbed the journal where I'd been writing everything, shoving it into my pack. If nothing else survived, maybe the record would. Maybe someone outside would find it. Maybe they'd understand. But as I slung it over my shoulder, a hand burst from the floorboards, my own hand. Nails cracked, skin burned. Gripping my ankle with crushing force, I screamed, kicking free. Lena firing point blank into the wood, the copy dissolving in smoke. But more followed, crawling up from the cracks, from the stairs, from the hatch, until we were surrounded, no way out, no escape. Only the rules in my head and the last one ringing loudest. When you doubt yourself, you are already replaced. "Obey!" The voices swelled into a single command. "Obey!" Echoing through my skull until my vision blurred, my knees buckling, the edges of my mind fraying like torn paper. Lena grabbed me, shaking me hard, her voice cutting through the roar. "Don't listen, Daniel. Don't let them take you. You're still you. You're still here." Her words felt fragile against the storm, but I clung to them, because if I let go, there was nothing left. Nothing but the spiral and its endless hunger. I forced myself to stand, every muscle screaming, shouting into the chaos, "I am Daniel Cole. I am not yours." For a moment, everything froze, the faces paused, the roar cut silent, and the spiral's light flared in the distance, brighter than the sun. The hum in my bones peaking until I thought I'd tear apart. Then the tower collapsed. I don't remember the fall, only the impact. The world spinning into shards of wood and stone. Smoke choking my lungs, Lena's hand gripping mine in the rubble, her face streaked with blood but her eyes fierce. Around us, the forest was gone. Nothing but the spiral stretching across the horizon. The borrowed faces spilling out in waves, endless, unstoppable. I dragged the journal from my pack with shaking hands, pressing it into hers, whispering, "If I don't make it, you tell them. You warn them." She shook her head, tears streaming. "No, you will. We both will." But I knew deep down one of us wouldn't leave that clearing. Maybe neither of us. The spiral pulsed again, the ground splitting wide, light flooding upward. And the voices rose one last time, my voice, Lena's, Rowan's, everyone I had ever known. Rule 12. You are already replaced. I don't know if I'm writing this as myself anymore, or as the echo they left behind. I don't know if the words on this page are mine or theirs. All I know is if you're hearing this, if you've read these words, the rules aren't just for rangers in Yellowstone. They're for you too. The spiral is growing. The locks are failing, and soon the voices won't stop at Tower 6. They'll find you. They'll knock at your door after midnight. They'll whisper your name from the radio. They'll wear your face and your memories until you don't know what's real anymore. And when that happens, you'll understand why I'm telling you this now. Because the rules were never about us surviving. They were about keeping the rest of you ignorant a little longer. So listen to me carefully. Don't open the door. Don't answer when they call your name. Don't follow the whistles, and above all else, remember this. When you start to doubt yourself, when your memories slip and your voice doesn't sound like your own, you've already been replaced, and the only question left is whether you'll obey or resist for one last night. And if you want to know the rest, if you want to stay alive a little longer, don't just scroll away. Don't pretend this is another story. Subscribe, stay with me. Because the next time the spiral opens, it won't be in Yellowstone, it'll be in your town. And when that night comes, you'll wish you'd remembered the rules.